All right, welcome, Buddy Book Club. My Namu is Dylan, and I'm here with my feudal lord and daimyo, Konnichiwa-sama.
Hello, Dylan-san.
Wow, I give you sama and you give me san?
You didn't see me. I'm literally bowing right now. I'm almost hitting the ground.
I was about to say,
so
you better be palms down on the ground.
There's deep respect right now for you. You just didn't see it.
Okay. We'll see. You might be going to commit some seppuku. We're breaking down some bestsellers, and this week we'll be discussing Shōgun by James Clavell. If you'd like to recommend a book for us to read or reach out to us on any past episodes, you can visit our website, buddybookclub.com, or slide to our DMs on Twitter or Instagram, Buddy Book Club Podcast. You can listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, so please download and subscribe. Keith, this one's a long time coming, honestly. I think when you first suggested that we take our immense talents to the internet and shame ourselves in front of all these people, that my first thought was, let's do Shōgun, which is one of my favorite books of all time. But it's an epic. It's a 1,000-page like airplane book, in the sense of when you go to the airplane bookstore and they only have the paperbacks that have the tiniest type. It's 1,000 pages there. So I'm really hoping that I'm not sending you to do something that you don't want to do and wasting your time, because I would feel immense shame and would be forced to commit seppuku.
I liked it so far. It's obviously a lot to go. For the readers out there, this is only going to cover part 1, which is the first 9 chapters. So I think it's about probably 10 hours, I would say.
It's broken up into 6 books with a prologue. So we're going to cover the prologue and book 1, which isn't a ton of content, but we also wanted to really set the stage of where we are in history, because this is a historical fiction book that does loosely tie back to things that happened in the real world. So we just kind of wanted to do a set and setting kind of pod with a little bit of content before we really dive in, because after this, it's just nonstop political and killing people and all sorts of fun stuff. Keith, let's jump into it with some stock up, stock down for book 1. Stock up, what do you got?
Stock up, old school full sends. Are you familiar with the term full send, D-Man?
I think so. If you're skiing and you decide to go off a cliff, really send it.
I'm just going to send it. And these are really my 3 favorite scenes. I'm gonna kind of spoil them right here, but I had to call them out because they're all great variations of full send in different capacity. Number 3, Blackthorn telling the story of his boat getting attacked, and there are people about to raid it. And he's like, oh, fuck this. Goes down, lights the magazine, which I had to look up, which is the magazine is where they stored the ammunition. Lights it. Those people start to jump onto his boat, get on there. He dives off. It explodes, kills all the people on his boat. He goes down with the ship, essentially, but he finds another boat, swims over, and takes captain of that one. Great example. Fuck this boat. Fuck these people. Lights everything on fire.
I'm pretty sure that's how the USS Arizona went down at Pearl Harbor, because that was the big explosion one.
Oh, really? They went in there and lit it on fire?
No. They just hit it with a torpedo or a bomb. So they hit that magazine, and that's where all the
ammunition is, yeah.
Munitions are, so the whole thing exploded immediately.
Yeah, I'd never heard of that. I've only heard of a gun magazine, which is obviously probably where it comes from. Number 2, Blackthorn tells Yabu, I think it was Yabu, but he's like, I'm going to piss all over your dead corpse, or I forget what he says exactly. And the Yabu's like, oh, okay, cool. Just pulls his dick out and pisses on him.
No, that was Omi.
Was it Omi? Sorry. See, I'm having trouble with the Omi and Yabu, the difference. The best part about that, though, really was Obi and Blackthorn both say, oh, at least he didn't piss on my face, because that would be too disrespectful. Pissing on his back, that's okay. That's really not that bad. But pissing on his face would have been the last straw. He gave him a break. That's the distinction.
Yabu is like, oh, why didn't you piss on the barbarian's face? If you're going to piss on him, why not piss on his face? He's like, oh, no, that'd be too much of a disgrace. There's no way he would come back after that.
Yeah, pissing on back's fine.
And then Yabu's like, very smart, very smart.
The number 1, by far, I laughed out loud when this happened.
Yeah.
Yabu's meditating. They're trying to get his attention because he's like, I'm going to die, whatever. I'm just going to, chill here. One guy goes, fuck it, bonsai, and dives off the cliff and lands next to him just to get his attention and dies instantly. That's what I'm here for. I'm all about that. I love that. That literally was a turning point. That was at the end of chapter 9. So that's when I said, I'm ready for part 2. Let's fucking go. So full sending. Old school. Love it.
Full sending, for sure. Also, pissing on people. If you really want to dominate over someone, to show them your power, you just pee on them. When my dog was a puppy and when she peed on the floor, people they make their dog sniff it. No, I pee on the dog. just to then show her.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you pee on the floor, I pee on you. Think about it.
Well, it wasn't in the face, though, so it would have been very disrespectful.
Yeah,
no,
I would not. Yeah. I would not pee in her face.
Yeah. But I also love the scream before it of bonsai. I mean, that's like freedom. You know, it's the same thing. Anytime you scream before you're about to kill yourself, that's great. You love to see it.
It's nice that cultures have different screams that they have to do before they go. And for us, it would be freedom, mostly after Mel Gibson in The Patriot. But that's for me.
Oh, that's Braveheart, sir. Come on.
Oh, excuse me. Mel Gibson in Braveheart. But Blackthorn, when he sees that samurai jump off the cliff, like kill himself just to potentially get Yabu's attention. Not like, oh, this is guaranteed to work out. Yeah. It's just for potential. That's like one of my favorite parts of the book in general, especially at the beginning, is just this total fish out of water vibe that's going on, where we can't imagine it now because you can see every culture on TV or in social media or within their own kind of art, whatever the case is. But back then he had no idea who these people were. It's just a mythical people, really. And they think it so many times in this that they're not the same people. You know, they're like, oh, these Japanese people are different. They don't feel cold. Like they say that a lot. Like, oh, they don't feel cold. Like they don't feel all these things. But they do. They just have a different way of going about it. And their culture doesn't allow it, especially with the samurai. You know, Bushido code is so important. And like the idea of duty, like their duty and allegiance to their liege lord is the most important thing within Bushido code. If you can die for your liege lord, that's the greatest thing ever. This guy's sacrifice, Blackthorn was just blown away by, being like, these people are actually psychotic. Who would possibly do that?
Right.
Because the European cultures value life so much, and not necessarily like what you do in life, but they value like life itself, which has its positives and negatives. Whereas the Japanese, the samurai in this, value duty and honor more than anything else. And they say it so many times, especially because they're Buddhist, or the vast majority of them are Buddhist. We'll talk probably later about the Catholicism involved. But they talk about reincarnation and just that life is a fleeting, it's a dewdrop within a dewdrop kind of thing. So to them, it's not a big deal. It's like, oh, well, if you were good and you die, it's like, well, then you're going to get reincarnated as something better. So who cares?
Anytime they have shame, they're just like, well, got to end it. I'm like, I'd have ended my life like 100 times at this point if shame was, that's all it took. I've been ashamed of myself millions of times.
Yeah, just standard shame. They're like, I can't possibly handle this shame.
Yeah.
Like I can't live with this. I must kill myself. Which we haven't seen anyone actually commit seppuku, except for the guy in the pit. Seppuku is ritualistic suicide, for those unaware, and it's an honor to commit seppuku for your liege lord. Like, if they give you that, I guess it's an honor. Obviously, it doesn't happen unless, like, bad things go down, but, like, no one's like, oh, happy birthday, commit seppuku.
Well, he only gave him, a small knife, right? So he couldn't technically do it. He could only slit his throat with that or something? Is that how it goes, or is it... I thought you had to have a certain type of knife to do it.
No, the small knife is the knife.
Okay.
So a samurai carries two swords. They carry their katana, which is, their killing sword, and then they also have a smaller dagger-sized sword. Mm-hmm. And that is the sword that you would use to commit seppuku. And actually, you would wrap a cloth or something around most of the blade, because you don't need much of the blade. You just need enough to cut open your belly and let your intestines fall out.
Oh, nice.
Which... if you're really disgraced, they just let you die that way, which could take days. But usually there's a second involved, and that second will cut off your head immediately after you've cut open your stomach. So, dying in a good way would definitely be having the second. Sitting there with your guts hanging out for a couple days, not so cool.
No.
My first stock up is baths.
Oh, nice.
This seemed
Me too.
too obvious. Okay, cool. I was like, I'm kind of surprised you didn't open with it, just because it seemed so obvious. And actually, my second one was ritualistic suicide, so I guess we'll just finish that one, because seppuku is really the only way to expiate a shame, a sin, or a fault.
I actually like the bonsai dive better than seppuku, but that's just me. Each their own.
Well, ritualistic suicide does both, but at least if you have a shame, a sin, or a fault, and you want to maintain your honor, you commit seppuku. It's good. You get reincarnated positively. So, we're supporting that. But baths, back to that. It's so interesting to me, the cultural clash where the Europeans think that baths make you sick, like bathing too often makes you sick. And the Japanese are like, bathe all the time, as often as you possibly can. Like, why wouldn't you? And it just seems blatantly obvious to me. Like, someone smells bad, you're like, that just seems sickly, right?
Yeah.
You even see when they're in the pit or whatnot, it's like, oh, they smell terrible. Like, it's horrible. So, like, wouldn't you want to get that off of you? I didn't really understand it, but Japanese baths, I mean, we're talking, you get the full treatment, you're getting massages, there's perfumed oils and all sorts of stuff going on in there. It sounds honestly wonderful. And I was just also interested in what's your take on baths in general, because I don't take baths, but I do miss them, because obviously as a child, it was a big thing.
I thought it's funny too, because when you think about like the Europeans back in the day, you think of them in the powdered wigs and they're like very prim and proper, but they're just gross. They're barbarians. They call them barbarians, and like if we saw them today, you'd be like, oh, this person's just absolutely disgusting. You know, you would be ashamed of them.
1,000%.
You need to see it through the eyes of the Japanese to be like, oh, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, and I also think it's funny you said the powdered wigs, because I think that kind of came from venereal diseases. Oh, really? I might be making this up, but I'm pretty sure the idea of like powdered wigs came about because of like syphilis or something, and like the scent of it all. When the Japanese call the Europeans barbarians in this, I'm like, hell yes, they are barbarians. These people are disgusting. You kind of just become so sympathetic to this Japanese culture, which seems, you know, they say Japan is, you know, the land of the gods or whatever, but it sure seems like it. It's beautiful. It's clean. Like even this small fishing village, everything is just like neat and tidy, and there's just this artful order to things. And the interests, obviously, most of this is coming from the samurai class, which has the ability to think about poetry and meditation, and not the working folk who I'm sure are busting their ass and not getting a lot of thanks for it. Then you think of the Europeans who are just filthy and disgusting and don't want to shower. And my other stock down, which I'm going to burn here, is that when someone's sick, they want to bleed them, which, why does that seem to make sense to you? Stock up Japanese culture over European culture.
I agree with that. The thing about massages too, or not massages, I had massages as a stock up as well.
They can go hand in hand.
I've never gotten one, but I'm like, I kind of want a bath and massage after this book. For me, the biggest issue with baths is I don't like just sitting somewhere and not having something to do. And I used to always bring a book in the bath whenever I was a little bit older. And biggest pet peeve was I would get it wet. You know, like my hands would be like turning the page, and now the book's all moldy and wet. I think audiobook solves that. So maybe I just now post up an audiobook. I'm feeling like I need to give it another shot.
It's funny. The first thing I did when I got my Amazon Kindle was I drew a bath, because it was exactly what you're saying. I used to bring books in or whatever the case was.
Did you paint it or use pencils, or how'd you draw it?
Oh, draw back.
Yeah, we're back.
The Kindle, you can get wet or whatever the case is. And it was so much better. I just sat there and I read and had a couple of brewskis in the bath. Yeah. It was a great experience. Yeah, it was a really good time.
There you go.
No bubbles, though. I didn't do the bubble bath. That's my fault. I mean, if I was reading this book, I would definitely be having some sake. You can go on. What about Stockdown?
Stockdown flirting. You know, you and I in a previous life would go to a bar. We were young whippersnappers. You know, a little moxie and hope still filled in us at that point. You know, now we're a little bit old curmudgeon, so a little different. Yeah. But at the time, I remember us out and about and me approaching a girl to flirt with at the bar and instantly getting rejected within 30 seconds and stumbling over my words and then coming back and drinking myself into a stupor. Pretty standard, really. Pretty typical night. But I don't know how they didn't figure out that all you need to do is walk up to this woman or girl and just point and yell woman at them. That's all you got to do, D-Man.
Una.
Woman. And she tells you your name and you just say, no, you're woman. You keep on saying it as many times as you possibly can and pointing. Eventually they just get into your bed and get naked. That's what happens in this book, which I'm just like, wait, what? Yeah. How does this work?
It was on there for one of my favorite scenes when his first encounter when he's hungry, but the woman thinks he wants sex. The oldest woman disrobes, and the others just like, they get all excited, and they just sit there expectantly, like, okay, like, let's see what happens next. Like, this is going to be fun.
It's kind of a little bit crazy, right? First of all, the arrogance to be like, no, your name's woman. Trust me, I know your name. I don't know your language, anything about it. You're woman. And then also just for them to be like, all right, sounds good. We did it wrong back in the day and, missed opportunity.
Missed opportunities indeed. And I was thinking about that. I was trying to tie that back to your the shame and the seppuku you'd be committing over the years.
Yeah, seriously.
And we'll probably be talking about this more in future episodes. But just the way that Japanese seemed, at least this culture, this samurai culture at the time, seemed to view sex is so fascinating to our ideas, which are formed from the European ideas, and Blackthorn gives us a little bit of insight into that. But, the idea of nakedness is something that people are not comfortable with in Europe, or, being around other people, where everyone seems to be mostly naked. At least the men, they wear their loincloths, and then they also freely are naked. It just, nakedness isn't, there's no shame behind it, which I think definitely comes from some form of Catholicism, probably. Mm-hmm. And then just with Kiku and Omi, so you're allowed a wife and then consorts, but Kiku is having sex with Omi / like he's over at her place, and then Omi's wife comes back to town, and Kiku's like, oh, I should go over there and just like let her know that he's here and see if she wants me to wake him up and bring him home. And his wife is so excited to see her. She's like, oh, hey, Kiku, how's it going? Kiku's like, oh, your husband's over at my place. We just banged, but should I bring him back? She's like, no, but sit and have cha.
I was so confused by that. I'm like, wait, is this the same person? Thanks for clearing that up, because I was very confused.
It's the same person. And I think I made this clear to the listeners out there, but this is my second full time reading the book. Granted, I haven't finished it. I'm going to keep track with the pod, but it will be my second full time. I did start listening to it a couple of years ago again. The first time I read it was in my early 20s. So I do remember some big stuff going on, or some of this stuff. So I do have an idea of like where things are going or whatnot, but I will say that the ideas of sex are very different, and the comfort level of giving your husband a night with a courtesan is at its highest. People are very comfortable with that, no problems whatsoever. So having a household that is your wife and lots of other women is okay. It'd be like your wife just giving you for your birthday like a gift, being like, oh, I got you this escort who will sing to you, serve you tea and sake in extremely graceful ways. She'll play the guitar, and then she'll lay you and maybe get a massage, whatever the case is. Yeah, it sounds terrible, honestly. Sounds terrible.
Yeah.
Caroline, if you're listening, terrible. Not interested. My first stock down, and kind of the only one I really have left, but is traveling anywhere by boat. Mm-hmm. We kind of talked about this in the last episode with the airship stuff, but boats just seem terrible. It all seems horrible. Like every bit of it. None of it would be interesting to me. The fact that this is how people had to travel to see the world, or to like get out of a situation, to, move to a new place. I just don't know what's happened with the world, or maybe I'm just looking at it from my own eyes, but I am extremely mentally weak. I would not be able to handle any of this. I would not be interested. They're like, all right, we're going to go travel. We don't know exactly where our end spot's going to be. Your teeth may fall out from scurvy, and the skin may fall off your face, and we have nothing to eat besides the maggots that are in our apples. But let's do it. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. I might make some money. I'll probably die, but I might make some money. No, thank you. The fact that anyone did this really blows me away. And once again, the Japanese are right, being like, I don't like to get on boats. We're not a seafaring people. We're land people.
Yeah.
So I support that.
I complain about like flying and worrying about flying, and it's like 1 in 300 million chance of dying on a plane. And then this, they're like, so yeah, you get in the boat. We're going to take out 5 of them. 4 of them are 100% not coming back. All those people on those they're dead. They're going to die. And then the boat that's going to come back, it's going to have like 10 to 20 of the 150 people we put on the boat. So it's, the ratio of surviving when you take a boat trip is like 5% chance. So let's take a bunch of those. It's like, okay, I'm out.
Yeah,
I'm out on that.
Even when Blackthorn's having his flashbacks to his teacher and learning about seafaring and wanting to go on this expedition with Drake, he's like, Drake is like, he's like, oh, he just did this amazing thing. He's like, yeah, but they only came back with like 10% of the crew. Wow, that could be me. I could be in that 10%. To me, I'd be like, I'm always in the 90%. So,
well, it's definitely like hey, you can get $100 million, only a 10% chance of living. Like, would you take that deal? That's like what they're actually signing up for. My last stock down is clocks in the gold standard. Give me the Japanese way. I've written a couple of blogs about time and just not understanding it in general. Same thing with currency. I have no idea really how currency worked, but I know back in the day, or at least until like the 60s or 70s, I want to say, we were backed by gold. So like every US dollar that's printed, we had enough gold to cover that. Basically, it was gold currency or gold standard. It never made sense. If you're starving or things like get destroyed and the country goes to shit, gold doesn't do anything, right? I can't eat gold. I can't fucking drink gold. It doesn't do anything. And it always made sense to like, oh, we should almost tie it to a resource that actually has supreme value, and that no matter when, 1,000 years from now, it'll have value. Like rice, which is what the Japanese do. Makes perfect sense to me. Perfect sense. The currency is rice for them, right?
Yeah, so in feudal Japan, a koku of rice is equal to the amount of rice a family will need to survive in a year. We should be on the wheat system or the corn system in the United States. It'd just be like, I'm going to give you 10 kiko. It's like, okay, or koku. It's like, okay, cool. That's 10 corn of rice. It's like, gold. What am I going to do with gold?
It's just you basically convert it to whatever is most popular dish. So like pizza for me, ice cream for you. Like it's just.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's like I don't know. That seems like a pretty expensive cost for that car. I'll give you 3,000 pizzas for it, and it just makes perfect sense to me. What that amount is, right? But like,
yeah. Well, actually, I don't even want to think about that with the couch shopping I did today. How many gallons of ice cream that thing's going to cost me?
Yeah, it makes way more sense.
Ice cream for life.
Because right now it's just a credit card. It's just money. It doesn't mean anything to me. There's no value to me.
Yeah,
you could buy this one gold ring. I'm like, I don't care about gold. Who gives a shit?
It's also important to teach people the value of your currency too, because if I was going to Crate and Barrel where I'm buying this dang couch and they were like, oh, all right, so you're going to have to bring in a tractor trailer full of ice cream. You have to bring in 10 years of ice cream that you're going to eat. I'd say like, no, I don't think I could do that. But now I just have this dollar with George Washington's face on it. And I don't care, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. And time. You said time, too. How did time tie into that?
So the time they use is the burning of a candle, which is like, they're like, all right, 3
incense.
Candles or whatever. Or is that what it is? Incense? Okay.
A stick of incense.
Yeah, which I don't know if they burn perfectly even, but I liked it. You know what? I don't think an hour makes any sense. Time doesn't make any sense to me. It's all arbitrary. Give me something that I can see, It's actually... once this is done, it's over. It makes more sense to me.
And the sailors use hourglasses, which also makes more sense. Mm-hmm. And I wish working for the man, it was like, hey, there's, you're working 9 hours today. It's like, flip over an hourglass, work that time, flip it over again, go do something, flip it over again, work. It would make it easier, I think, for me to crush work as opposed to just like sitting there all day being like, good God, there's still so much time to pass. Plus the incense burning, it like tracks time, but it's also smells wonderful.
Yeah. They know what they're doing with smells here. I appreciated that.
Do you have a favorite scene? I feel like the first book or the prologue in the first book is kind of broken up into, we got the Erasmus, which is the ship that Blackthorn, they crash into Japan. We have the guys in the pit. That's the whole thing. Blackthorn meeting Yabu. The torture night, Yabu's favorite, when Yabu gets his rocks off to people getting tortured. And then aboard the Japanese galley where, lo and behold, another storm comes, and then saving Rodrigo. Those are kind of like the big things that happen in there.
I think the boat with the Portuguese captain was the best. I think the prior part was kind of setting up, hey, this is a fish out of water. This is what I'm trying to say. This is what they're interpreting, and things like that back and forth. Mm-hmm. Once you got someone that was in there, I think once the action started happening and there was a little bit more streamlined communication, it made it much more enjoyable for me. What about you?
Yeah, I agree in that sense. And I do love how this book, because it's so long, this is a huge novel. And so many times when you get these big novels, it just jumps kind of like perspective to perspective, which this does. Mm-hmm. It's not just coming from Blackthorn, you're getting other people's perspectives. But it kind of zooms out to like different places and different things that are happening. Where Shōgun it's just focused in this fishing village in Izu. And we're getting some understanding really of the geopolitical situation, but not a ton. And then obviously we're going to learn a lot more. Like we're approximately like 200 pages into a 1,000-page book. Like many of the main characters haven't even been introduced to us yet, which is really enjoyable. I like to think about books like this almost as like a mini series where, this would be the first episode maybe. 3 of the most important characters or 2 or 3 of the most important characters like haven't even been introduced to us yet. There's so much left to go on that front. There's so much back and forth with the language stuff that not like a ton happens. But I did love everything surrounding the pit, between them going into the pit, all the fish guts getting dropped on them being like, what the hell are we doing here? The samurai coming down and him murdering himself, and everyone's like, what the hell's going on? Them drawing straws, but that not even working out. So that going into the torture night, because then you're like, what the hell are they going to do to torture him? Which I must say, boiling someone alive, pretty fucked up.
I also didn't really understand, other than like the love for torturing. It was like, they're like, we want to make these people our vassals. And that was kind of one of my lingering questions I can bring up now. But like, is revenge, is that not a thing in Japan? The best way to get someone to be subservient is not necessarily to start boiling their friends alive. It doesn't seem like that would be the best way. What do I know?
Yeah, but what's funny is both groups look at the other as a dumb animal. I think it says a lot about like people in general.
Like you're beating the dog type thing to make it
exactly
obedient. Okay.
Exactly. They're trying to get obedience out of these people, and they became aware of how much a person's life matters to them. Like they even say when it comes to Anjin-san, who is John Blackthorne, how he would let someone piss on him so that one of his people wouldn't die, like
right.
a lesser person than him. They're like, well, that's ridiculous. We would never allow that to happen. But they realize, okay, it's cool with him. So the torture is, okay, well, now we can hang this over you. We can torture anyone at any time if we want. Mm-hmm. So, but it's also just Yabu being a sick fuck and just loving torture and wanting to be part of that. I was down with that. I really liked also the like saving Rodrigo stuff, where it was, Blackthorne kind of challenges Yabu, and Yabu's like, okay. That made a little bit more sense to me as like, okay, I want Blackthorne to be my vassal. I'm going to show him that I'm not just this one thing that he thinks I am. I'm much more than that. And I'm also much strong, like, because Yabu's kind of like a short, fat guy. So I think to see him nimbly scaling down a mountain and also just like knowing that he's a good swordsman as well is like, okay, well, maybe this Yabu guy ain't too bad. And then you also owe him. And that does matter. But in a small favorite scene, maybe it was the old Japanese lady who was so happy to see his big European penis that she said she can now die happy. That I enjoyed very much.
Someone of European descent, I was pretty proud of our ancestors there.
He's like, oh, my mother says she can now die happy because she saw your penis erect. He's like, all right.
For me, they'd be like, we were expecting a lot more, honestly. We heard stories. That's a shame. It's too bad.
The Russian judge gives it a 3. Let's do some lingering questions. What do you got?
I know they want to make them vassals. Once someone revolts and kills one of my boys, I feel like you just put them all down.
What do you mean? When did someone do that?
So they revolt and they kill the one samurai, or basically fuck them up so that they throw them in the pit with them. What was the advantage to keeping them alive? I understand the skills and the necessariness to keep Blackthorne, but why wouldn't you just be like, all right, fuck all these dudes. We don't need them. Like, what are they providing?
Well, I think the idea is that Blackthorne's interest in keeping them alive will keep him under control. So Blackthorne wants his men to survive. So if you keep them alive, then Blackthorne can then still be taken control of.
Okay.
Whereas if they just kill all of them, then Blackthorne will really just be out for vengeance, the whole thing. And also, Yabu doesn't care about that one samurai. Like he doesn't care about 10,000 samurai if it helps him get to where he wants to be. And Yabu's also smart enough to know that these barbarians are not like the Portuguese barbarians. They could be useful to him. He doesn't yet know why. He has ideas, like his idea to have them teach samurai how to use this barbarian boat, maybe against the Portuguese or against other Japanese, because if the Japanese are able to sail that, it could change a lot of things, as well as having a musket-armed regiment of samurai, which obviously these Europeans know how to use those weapons. They might be better, because the only Portuguese that are currently in Japan are Jesuits and priests, so they're not going to be the ones that they would go to learn armaments. So I think that's part of it.
The other thing that I thought was interesting, and I was going to bring it up with the flirting stock, but it was kind of strange to me that I don't know if they just devalue women a lot more, or the idea of sex is just not a big deal to them. But like, if you're going to take these people and you're like, we're going to imprison them, we're going to fucking get them under our thumb, why are you also giving them the benefits of, here's some nice like vegetables and food, and also here are all these prostitutes, you can just sleep with them whenever you want? If you think these are barbarians and shitty people that you should be in jail, why were you also treating them to things like that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think a lot of that stuff at the beginning is also more of taking a lamb to slaughter, in the sense of if they know they're going to die, if you tell them, oh, we're going to torture all of you to death, then who knows what they could do? They're going to get
Because the
unruly.
samurai
They
hadn't been
might,
there yet, so they're like, we need to keep them nice and
exactly.
calm. Okay, that makes sense.
Exactly. So they're like, we're just going to keep these guys fed, nice and calm. We have no idea what Yabu's going to want to do with them.
Yeah.
It probably won't be good, but in order to make sure that they don't go crazy and start tearing our town apart, like, let's just make sure they have no semen in their testicles.
That's smart, actually. I didn't. All right, that really does a good answer there. I didn't think about that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Gomen nasai. That means I'm sorry, I think. So I don't know why I said that.
And I had prediction, but I think obviously that Blackthorn will learn Japanese and then start to appreciate their customs. His rage will still be there, which was like they're not used to that, which is going to be a good thing. Obviously like they're used to like being like, everything internalized and like very relaxed and like no emotions. But he's going to use that and like they're going to be like, all right, this dude's fucking badass because he has this rage.
Yeah, he's got this berserker energy. Because we all know at this point, Blackthorn's going to have some sort of transformation. And he's such a perfect main character for this because of his curiosity, and he's super intelligent.
Yeah, his ability to pick up languages, I think, is the most important thing.
Yeah, 100%. Well, he's also, bilingual, which probably should have been his stock up in general, or he's like trilingual, like he speaks Latin, Dutch, English, Portuguese. Yeah, he's like quadlingual. And you see it later, which, it's going to be a little bit of a spoiler alert, but in the next section, they go into Osaka, because that's where we leave them at the end of this part. And they go into Osaka, and he immediately starts to trying to figure out, like, how could I take this castle if I wanted to? It's just like his brain's always working, and you need to be quick in this society to survive. When it comes to this book, one of the things I just love in general about it is just the intricacies of the conversation between samurais and even the nonverbal aspects, because everything is so strategic. The slightest slight could mean that you're saying something so terrible, but you can't say that, so you just kind of put a little something in there and it's like, oh my God, that was so, but then the other person can't respond to it. Someone says, oh, this soup was kind of cold that you cooked. You can't be like, oh, how dare you?
Well, they're either going to 0 to 100 because they're either like, you're right, you can have all of my property, or they're pulling their dick out, pissing on someone, or they're like throwing the food on the ground saying, this is fucking pathetic. You shouldn't be my son's wife. Like, you're a piece of garbage. I was like, Jesus Christ. So there's either a ton of subtlety or none. Nowhere in between.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I want to just set a little bit of the stage here because we didn't get to a ton of it. So I want to make sure that's clear. And how we're going to break this up is instead of doing a book report, we're going to do a little history lesson here, and should be mostly painless because I'm not going to involve any real names or dates. But I think the key aspects are what's going on in Europe at the time, what's going on in Japan at the time, and how those two fit together. Does that make sense?
I mean, obviously America, so you got to include that. What year is it?
It's 1600. The year.
Yeah,
1600.
we're about to overthrow the British in 176 years, so we're fine.
None of the Americas are actually charted yet. No one's actually been into the Americas.
No, you were at 1490s, right?
Yeah, but I mean, they've seen the coastal lands, but no one has really permeated into, and that's with most countries. At this point in history, we know the shapes of the major continents, but no one has really dove into those a ton except for some of the South American stuff in terms of the New World.
That's kind of crazy because it's so much harder to get to Japan than it is to America, right? From England, right? And from Netherlands.
So they've been there. I mean, obviously people live there, but Europeans and whatnot could have been there. The idea of looking into the country, more than 20 miles in or whatever the case is, just not happened. So Shōgun itself, the book, although it is historical fiction, it gives an account of the rise of some of these daimyos, right? And we've heard about Toranaga, he's going to be involved in there. A battle happened in right after 1600 that this kind of draws from. So this happened in there. And there was a English sailor, William Adam, who was around at the time. So he kind of plays the John Blackthorn character. It's somewhat loosely based on the events that did happen in real life around this time. And in Europe at the time, the Netherlands had recently won a civil war that they talk about here, the 80 Years' War, to gain independence against the Spanish Catholics. And the Netherlands, their ruling family is Protestant. Netherlands are loosely allied with England, thanks to Queen Elizabeth, who is also Protestant. The Spanish and Portuguese Catholic, English, Netherlands, Protestant. Simple as that. But the Spanish and Portuguese divide the world between themselves via a couple treaties. We don't care what those treaties are, but they basically say, all right, out of all the New World, here's what you get, here's what we get. And the Catholic Church is the real imperial power with the Pope at its head, who gives the Spanish and Portuguese the right to go forth and convert all of these people, or kill, rape, and pillage, whichever one you say, in the name of God. Mm-hmm. That's what's happening in Europe. Pretty simple. In Japan, there's been like 6 centuries of constant civil war. 35 years ago, a minor daimyo, Garoda, he was able to conquer almost all of Japan, but then was assassinated by one of his generals. That's going to become important later, that this general that assassinated him. But Garoda's best strategic general and vassal, the man that would go on to become the Taiko, who they've talked about, he consolidated power with the help of Toranaga and Ishido, who are these 2 big bad daimyos. And this led to a time of peace that lasted for a decade. The Taiko couldn't become shogun because he was peasant-born, so he just took on the title of Taiko. And a year ago, the Taiko died, and with his heir, Yemen, only 7 years of age, there's now a power vacuum. So the Taiko set up 5 regents to rule until his son Yemen comes of age. Those regents include Toranaga and Ishido, and then those are the big power players. Those are really the only ones we have to super care about. They're sworn enemies. And then there's 3 other guys, and the only kind of important thing is that 2 of those other guys are Christian. So how this Japan and Europe thing fits together is Japan needs silks from China. China won't trade with Japan, but wouldn't mind getting some of that Japanese silver. So the Portuguese, who arrived in Asia a couple of decades ago, can trade with China, and they have a base in Macau. The Chinese gave them Macau. So since the Portuguese can trade with China and also can trade with Japan, the Japanese have a working arrangement with the Portuguese to trade silver for Japanese silks. And in exchange, the Japanese allow the Portuguese to operate in Japan and convert some of the populace.
That's a really good rundown. First off, appreciate that. That's helpful. Why don't the Japanese learn Chinese? It seems like they're giving too much power to the Portuguese just as translators.
Well, I'm sure that some people speak Chinese that live in Japan, but the Chinese won't trade with Japan. They're enemies.
So you're saying they're a middleman. So they're Japan.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay. That
exactly.
Makes
so the Portuguese are just acting as a middleman. But the Portuguese get a lot out of it because they get their take. So they get rich off of their take, which they send home yearly in the Black Ship, which we've heard about briefly. So there's a Black Ship that every year goes from Asia back to Spain or Portugal or whatever, loaded with money. And on top of that, these Jesuit priests get somewhat free reign to go around Japan and convert people. Like the Japanese daimyos, like the head daimyos, most of them don't like Christians. There's 2 Christian daimyos, but Ishido and Toranaga, neither of them have any interest in having Christians on Japan soil. Mm-hmm. But because they are needed for this exchange with China, they pretty much put up with them and allow them some leniency.
And is the Suez Canal, is that a thing right now, or is that not until, is that man-made?
The Suez Canal?
Suez, sorry, yeah.
Isn't the Suez in the Middle East?
Yeah, so to get back to Portugal, do they need to go below Africa?
Oh, no, yeah, they go through Magellan's Pass. So, they go below, South America.
Oh, really? Yeah, so there's no Panama Canal. Is that shorter, Japan all the way to Portugal, rather than the other way around?
Yeah, I don't think there is a current path through Africa. But yeah, so in this world where obviously there's tons of stuff going on, and Japan has had 10 years of peace after hundreds of years of civil war, pretty much. Now there's this power vacuum with the Taiko out. So it's kind of like Blackthorn, who we meet at the beginning, is just thrown into this powder keg, and he's at the middle of everything that's going to be happening for kind of the world. It's a huge event for the world. And although this is not a true story, there are some truths to it. The author obviously did a ton of research. Who could even imagine? The epic scale of this is what I love so much, because it also is the opposite, where you just get these minute, intimate details between two people, and later we're going to see inside some of these like super powerful people's heads and like how they think and how they strategize, and it's like mind-blowing stuff. I'm not that smart, so it's nice to read about someone else that's that smart.
At the time in Japan, do they think they're all Japanese? It's not like a united country, right? Or is there like some samurai code that everyone believes they're under?
Yeah, well, there is the emperor. There is the emperor.
I didn't know there was an emperor. All right.
Yeah, so there's an emperor, comes from an unbroken line of this family. They're legit deity. Like, they are a son of God.
Okay.
But they don't actually hold any real power, per se. But the emperor can grant power to other people. So the emperor's kind of a shitty situation because they don't make any money. They can't make any money. Only like the daimyos or like who's ever running it give them like an allowance. So there's been like Japanese emperors in feudal Japan who were poor, like had to like sell things to actually like eat. And that's kind of this whole idea of a shogun, which is the ultimate rank a mortal can achieve in Japan. And I say immortal because the emperor is immortal in their mind. So, and a shogun means supreme military dictator. Only one man can hold that title at a time, and only the emperor, the divine son of heaven, can grant you that title. So you do need the emperor. Like, the emperor is very important, but at the same time, he's not important at all.
It's like the royal family in the UK.
Yeah, kind of, honestly, at least at this point, the current point. Japanese itself is an island nation that is one unified group of people, but it is divided in that there are different daimyos who run different areas of that country. We're not going to say would you recommend it because, we're just kind of scratching the surface, but what are you most excited for this next section, which will probably be book 2?
Well, I'm just picturing the montage of him training and learning the language and like building up his strength, becoming the chosen one, so to speak.
You're waiting for him to beat Tom Cruise in The Last Samurai.
I'm thinking that's Tom Cruise, the whole time.
I'm excited to meet Toranaga. He's the best, honestly.
Spoilers.
It's not a spoiler. Like, they've been talking about Toranaga the whole time, how important he is and whatnot.
A lot of the people we've met so far are all very, very smart. But most of the time when you get to leadership, it's a person that's in power, but that shouldn't have the power. Typically, I would say most of the time when you're expected to meet someone that's powerful, you're not really expecting much in the way of like, oh, this guy's the greatest. Unless they're prefacing it with, he took power at the age of like 12 by fucking killing his parents. And
yeah, well, you think about someone like Yabu, who's obviously smart, cunning, deceitful, but also is still alive. So you're like, okay, what? But then Yabu bows to Toranaga. So it's like, how smart, cunning, and deceitful must this person be to be able to have not only Yabu, but tens of Yabus. And then he's also fighting against all these other regions. So there's going to be a lot of fun stuff in Osaka Castle. But Keith, this was fun. Shōgun, God, it's just such a big world. It's such a big world out there, and I'm glad we're exploring feudal Japan. Feudal Japan just seems so much cooler than kings and queens of Europe and that stuff. This just seems way more entertaining. We're talking about Bushido code. There's samurais. Like, this is really happening. There's going to be ninjas in this story. There's going to be ninjas.
This definitely gave me appreciation for Japan. Other than the fish and the vegetables, I could do without that. But everything else sounds pretty sick.
Keith, that's Shōgun Part 1. We'll catch you for Part 2. Alrighty then. Bye now.
Bye now.